Hello and welcome to Ottawa Business Journal's continuing coverage of COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Michael Curran, the publisher of the Ottawa Business Journal. Way back in March, in the early days of this crisis, OBJ launched a new podcast called Coping with COVID-19. And it was our intent at that point to bring you via video many of Ottawa's business leaders face-to-face in a very interactive format. We talked to experts in law, accounting, real estate, restaurants. But today is a special event for us because we're doing our first live event. And of course, I couldn't think of a better way of doing it than having His Worship Mayor Jim Watson join us today. So today is a milestone for us, going live and allowing you to interact with the mayor, who will be introduced in just a few seconds here. So a few things about the people you'll see on the screen today. That's me on the left. Peter Kavesi will be on screen in just a second. Peter's job today will be to sift through some of the questions that were submitted in advance via email. We have many of those. And in addition to that, we'll be using the Q&A function in this Zoom to get some live Q&A questions from you. Peter, again, will sift through those and pose those questions to the mayor. Just a little bit of information on what this is going to look like today. So for about the first 10 minutes, I'll be chatting directly with the mayor. And at 12:11, those should be 11:11, we'll introduce the interactive polls. And we'll have some questions, which is really the main part of today, the questions from you, and we'll wrap up at 11:30. We appreciate that everyone is, or most of us are working from home these days, but just because you're at home doesn't mean you can't stay connected to OBJ. We've had a tremendous traffic on our website. You can visit it at obj.ca. That's updated regularly throughout the day. We have OBJ Today email newsletter. You can sign up at the link there. Our YouTube channel has 800 videos and a new feature. You can listen to some of these interviews in audio-only format on soundcloud.com. Just before we bring in the mayor, I wanted to point out that today's podcast is brought to you by Bright Sky. Bright Sky is an Ottawa-based company offering the ultimate in cloud and cybersecurity for Canadian businesses. You can check them out at brightsky.com. And in about 10 days, we'll do an entire video devoted to cybersecurity. I know at Ottawa Business Journal, we've noticed ourselves many of the different nefarious attempts to hack our corporate network or various other things. So right now, we're going to bring in the mayor. We'll unmute your mic. And Peter will bring you in as well. Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Hi, Michael. Nice to be on your first live podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Peter, thanks again for joining us and helping out in sifting through the questions today.
My pleasure.
So, Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor,
Mike.
I'll start with you.
You look like you're...
Yeah, I'll start with you, Mr. Mayor. Today, of course, is the first day of May. And we're going to have a lot of questions, I think, that are going to be very, very specific in nature. So we'll start off at a bit of a high level. March, as I remember back to it, was pretty well an unmitigated crisis like we've never seen before. April, to my mind, from a business perspective, was adjusting to that crisis period. I'm curious, as we just enter a new month of May here, what do you anticipate?
Well, you know, it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you because it's a lot of the unknown that we're dealing with. You know, I think we're having a relatively couple of good days, and then just earlier this week we had the largest number of deaths as a result of COVID-19 when 12 people lost their lives within the city of Ottawa. There are some positive signals. Today, for instance, landscaping companies can start going back to work, doing minimal work. It's not decorative work, but minimal work, getting yards ready and so on. So that will help some people find employment or retain their employment. We're working obviously with the province because ultimately the province will make those final decisions as to when everything from certain types of businesses, schools can open. And the Premier over the last 2 days has been bullish and optimistic, asking businesses to start getting ready for opening. So he may be able to announce some limited openings over the course of the next several weeks. But he and I are on the same page. It has to really be driven by health and science, and not that we're pushed into this because people are upset or angry. I understand that it's been very, very frustrating for the public not to have access to all the stores. Obviously, the business owners who have lost in many instances 100% of their revenue, and those people who have lost their jobs. So we're going to have to work in collaboration, as we have been with the other two levels of government, to see what we can do in a safe and organized fashion. Because as you know, Michael, the last thing we want to do is rush and then see a peak come back again, and we have to go through this agonizing process of laying people off a second time.
Yeah, those are good comments. I think as I think forward to May, as you indicated, none of us have a crystal ball, and we don't have, as the Premier said, this isn't a calendar, it's more of a roadmap for reopening. Certainly it does look, as we get a bit more good news, that the theme of May will be reestablishing in a limited sense some businesses. Mr. Mayor, a lot of people, of course, relate to you in this current role. You've got a lot of diverse experience. I want to go back earlier in your career, 20 years ago, when you were heading the Canadian Tourism Commission, and effectively you had a major job in economic development type job, running and helping to promote a billion-dollar industry. So I wanted you to think back to some of those economic development skills, and of course you're a member of the Invest Ottawa board, so you're directly have your finger on the pulse of the local economy. What are some of the steps that you think Ottawa will need to take to get back on its feet from a business perspective?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The tourism industry, obviously, specifically, is a mainstay of our economy, third largest employer. Michael Crock and his team do great work promoting Ottawa, but obviously every tourism board and agency around the world has really had to slow down or stop altogether, because no one is traveling from a leisure point of view or a business point of view for all intents and purposes. When I was president of the Canadian Tourism Commission, we were dealt the blow of 9/11 and the impact that had on tourism and worldwide travel. People just clamped down, stayed at home. And we were able to work with the federal government, which we were a federal crown corporation, to secure significant new dollars for domestic ad campaigns. We're traditionally known for spending our dollars, most of our dollars, outside of Canada to attract people inside. But I think the strategy going forward after COVID-19 is really going to try to get people within our country to travel within their country, staycations, maybe one-tank trips where people go off to, if they live in Kingston, come to visit Ottawa for a day or two, stay overnight. So we're going to have to rethink the tourism marketing model. The other thing is, from a broader perspective, not just tourism, but we have established an economic recovery task force that I chair, along with Eli El-Shantiri, who's our representative on the Business Improvement Areas Council, and Laura Dudas, who's the vice chair of FEDCO, Finance and Economic Development Committee. And it has people like the president of Invest Ottawa, representatives from the BIAs, the Regroupement des Gens d'Affaires, the Board of Trade, the Chamber of Commerce, and Festival Network, Tourism Ottawa. All of these groups, the heads of these organizations, have been meeting on a regular basis to come up with a plan on the short term, and we developed a marketing strategy that has now been rolled out to encourage people to order online, curbside delivery, gift certificates, to get some of the cash into some of these businesses that are still open now. And so I'm just battling my usual cold this time of year, and try to get revenue into their pockets and their cash registers now, so that they can survive when they're ready to open and thrive. And then we're looking at sort of the midterm, when businesses are allowed open. How can we be helpful? For instance, we cut the patio fees in half. We want to make sure that when people are going down, there's not going to be aggressive ticketing, parking tickets. The last thing people need, they're going to help support a local business, is to have a parking ticket because they've stayed 5 minutes or 10 minutes after the meters expire. So we have to do whatever we can to convince the local economy to support the local businesses. And we're in much better shape than a lot of other cities, because the large portion of public servants, most of whom have not lost their job or their paycheck, have the financial capacity to help these small businesses hit the ground running when they're finally given the okay to open their doors.
It's definitely going to take a community-wide effort. It's good to know that you're connected to all those business leaders on that committee. We're going to launch our first poll of the day right now. It should be coming on your screen in just a second. We'll have about 4 of these polls, but the first one, as you can see right here, says ask all of us to look into a crystal ball a little bit and say which business sectors will rebound the soonest. Note that you can make multiple selections. We'll let the poll go for about another 20 seconds or so, and then take a look at some of those results, share them on your screen. So here, maybe about 10 more seconds. Looks like we've got a leader. Construction is doing quite well. I'll share that result in a second. And professional service. All right, well, thank you. We've got, wow, we've got dozens and dozens of votes. Well, I'll wrap up that poll. Thanks for everyone's results here. And I'm sharing them on screen. So it looks like, Mr. Mayor, when we asked which sector might rebound the soonest, we have construction up there at 61% of respondents. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've actually been quite fortunate in Ontario, unlike Quebec that basically shut down the construction industry. Our construction industry, with a few exceptions, has been allowed to continue to work. I look out my door here on Elgin Street and the construction workers are finishing that very important city building project. So roads, transit, hospital construction, these major construction projects, pipes, water, sewer, were allowed to continue, as have road repairs and so on. So we've been actually engaged in that, and it's probably not, I hate to say it, but it's probably the best time to be doing the work on Elgin Street because of COVID-19 has shut down a lot of these businesses. They went through the agony of the last year, having the street torn up while their businesses were open. Now many of the businesses are closed, some are still open, and encourage people to come and patronize them. But it's the new home builds that have been stopped as a result of the provincial order. Those that had a building permit and that had construction already begun are allowed to continue working on those homes.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Listen, we're going to get down to the business at hand, which is getting your questions to the mayor. And Peter's going to start off here with some of the questions that were submitted in advance via email. And then as we work our way through these questions, we'll be looking for your input on the Q&A. So once again, you can use that Q&A function. I see that some of you have already submitted some questions, but Peter, over to you for the first question for the mayor.
Thanks, Mike. So our first question was submitted by Michael Crockett, the president and CEO of Ottawa Tourism. As we alluded earlier, tourism is one of the city's largest industries. So it all goes to stand that the recovery of the tourist sector is going to be part of the city's overall economic recovery. So the specific question from Michael was, how can the tourism industry best work with the city to ensure that all the businesses put in place appropriate public health measures that can ensure that all these tourism-oriented businesses are open and operating at as close to full capacity as possible?
I'm really proud of the very positive relationship that Ottawa Tourism and under the leadership of Michael Crockett and his whole team just across the street from us here on Elgin Street. They were great partners when we really went to the next level of tourism promotion during 2017. And saw all sorts of records broken with airport arrivals, hotel revenues, occupancy, and so on. And we built on that the last couple of years. There was some fear that we'd have a bit of a 2017 hangover. That actually didn't happen, and we saw great growth in the tourism industry. So now this is probably the single largest challenge facing the tourism industry in our lifetime, much bigger than 9/11, because 9/11 was relatively a short period of time. It happened obviously on one day, and the repercussions lasted a long time, but the industry was able to pick itself up and start try getting people to travel. So we'll have to continue to work with Ottawa Tourism and whatever we can do to help promote Ottawa. We've got to encourage people within our own city to go and visit some of the attractions and festivals and so on. We've seen a lot of body blows to the industry with the cancellation of Blues Fest, Canada Day, Tulip Festival, Jazz Festival. So we're going to hopefully, if we get the all clear signal, be able to take in some of these festivals later on in the summer and into the fall, and sporting events as well. But this is all dependent obviously on health and science considerations. But if we do see some of the loosening up, we're going to have to call upon the 1 million+ people that live in the city of Ottawa to help these businesses. It may be a romantic getaway at one of our hotels for an anniversary. Instead of going to Niagara Falls, why don't you just spend it in in Ottawa on the Byward Market or downtown or at the Brook Street or something like that. I think also, we have to obviously start to encourage businesses to start rebooking conventions and business shows, because that obviously brings a significant amount of money. I think people at this point are really tired of conference calls and Zoom and would like to have face-to-face meetings, and I think we have to capture that sentiment, particularly with the federal government, so that if we don't have people in the hotel rooms, they're not paying the municipal accommodation tax, and that really is the bread and butter of Ottawa Tourism's budget, so that they're able to go out and market Ottawa as a tourism destination as a result of that municipal accommodation tax that's at every hotel room. So as you can well imagine, they've seen a significant loss in that, because so few people are staying in hotels, and many of the hotels, in fact, are closed for the time being.
Some good points there, and let's hope there's maybe a little bit of a pent-up demand in terms of conferences and conventions, and that if 2020 unfortunately is going to be a bit of a disaster, maybe 2021 can be a more buoyant year. Peter, let's go to our next advanced question. I'm also noticing there's several questions coming in on Q&A, but let's continue on some of those advanced email questions.
Absolutely. So we received several questions from the city's real estate community related to property taxes. Of course, the city has brought in some tax deferral measures for buildings of a certain size, but there have been calls from members of the local real estate community to see that expanded and become more inclusive. So the question that was submitted is, do you foresee any additional property tax measures being introduced for commercial property owners and their tenants?
Well, as you pointed out, Peter, we did, I brought forward a motion to council that was approved unanimously that will allow a deferral from the June-July payment to October to give people a little bit of a fighting chance to get some cash flow issues resolved. As you also know, the cities, any city in Ontario, is prohibited from doing what is called bonusing. That is giving an unfair economic advantage to a particular business. We're not allowed to subsidize businesses like you often see in the United States, where they offer massive subsidies to locate a Toyota plant from one part of the city, one part of the country to another. So we have limitations. What we're doing with the tax deferral is doing what we can. The federal and provincial governments do have programs that are available, but we don't have the financial capacity or the legal capacity to offer any kind of a grant or incentive of that nature. And in fact, we're losing about $1 million a day as a result of massive decline in transit ridership, as well as complete reduction of recreation fees and rentals of arenas and swimming pools and so on. So we're doing what we can with the tax deferral. We were, I think, if not the first city, one of the first cities in the country to actually offer this kind of a tax deferral program that so far it hasn't had a lot of pickup. I think I'm just looking to Matt, is it 700 or 800 businesses that have looked at? I forgot my note. There have been about 700 businesses that have applied. There are certain criteria, obviously. We're trying to really target small business, not big corporations. But people will start, I think, applying when they start to see their tax bill come in, and there'll be information on the tax bill, how they can apply for the deferral. They can go to ottawa.ca also to get more information. So let's really promote that. It gives some people some breathing space. It doesn't forgive taxes, but it certainly gives a delay so that companies and the small businesses have a fighting chance of opening and surviving after this.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to our second poll here that will emerge on screen. And it really is kind of the corollary of the first poll. So the first poll was about which sector will rebound the soonest. This is really the opposite. Which sector will take the longest to rebound? And we'll have people select some votes. We have lots of votes coming in now. Wow, that's great. And we'll give you about another 10 seconds and take a look at it. Not to spoil the results here, but it looks like hospitality and tourism, which we've talked about a little bit, is unfortunately the leader so far in this poll. Okay, we'll give it about 3 more seconds. Wow. Here we go. We'll share some results. As you can see, pretty unanimously, it was listening to a commentator on the radio, and he's making a great point that a lot of the hotels really have been hardest hit, and it's unlikely, even though some of the restaurants, can have a takeout service or something like that, the hotels might be further set back and be longer in the future. Peter, why don't we go to, I guess I'll leave it to you, Peter, to go either to one of the advanced questions or the questions popping up in Q&A, but take it away.
Yeah, I'd like to draw on one of the questions that has been submitted in the Q&A function. The question has to do with Ottawa's manufacturing sector. So often we talk about the city's tech sector, tourism, real estate, but the COVID-19 crisis has really shone a light on Ottawa's manufacturing industries, as several local companies are in overdrive manufacturing important testing equipment, protective gear, and the like. So the question is, do you see this as part of a permanent shift? Do you think that Ottawa's manufacturing sector is going to become, I guess, more important going forward and become, I guess, part of Ottawa's economic strategy going forward?
I think, if there's been a couple of good things that have come out of COVID-19, most things obviously are quite horrid with the deaths and illness and so on. It really has shone a spotlight on some ingenuity and innovation here in our own backyard, whether it's, a company in Stittsville that's manufacturing masks, or a distillery in the East End that's converted their alcohol business into hand sanitizer. I hope that it does act as a bit of a renaissance and rebirth for the manufacturing sector. We're not known as a manufacturing city. It's relatively small compared to obviously the high-tech sector and software and communications. But my hope is that these companies have shown how nimble they can be and how quick they can respond. And obviously, as we do a review of what went well and what didn't go so well, one of the things that didn't go so well was that we consistently had a series of PPE shortages, personal protective equipment shortages, whether it was the N95 masks or gowns or other devices. We've had a company that's designed a test kit that has the test results that can be turned around in a matter of minutes as opposed to days or hours. So I'm hoping that we see that rebirth, and that these companies that have converted can actually continue to do some of the good work they're doing to provide this needed equipment, not just in times of crises, but also to add to our stockpile, because I think there have been some challenges with stockpile issues with first responders as well. And what I've tried to do at each council meeting that we've had these virtual city council meetings, is highlight 3 or 4 local small business success stories that have worked really well in our fight against COVID-19, and highlight these individuals, many of whom are, in many instances, giving away the product or a deep discount as part of their corporate responsibility back to the community.
It really does highlight, Peter, your question that Ottawa is exceptional when it comes to a lot of research and development, technology, advanced manufacturing. Dr. Paul Lim from Spartan Bioscience, of course, it was quite something to hear the Prime Minister name his company as one of the first in Canada that was able to pivot. Of course, he's doing some DNA-based COVID-19 tests. Just before you ask your next question, Peter, we're going to go to another poll, and this will allow you to sit through some of our Q&A. So our third poll question is coming on screen now, and it really kind of touches in a lot of the theme. Of course, today's May 1st, so we're asking here, in what month do you think most businesses will start reoccupying their offices, stores, restaurants, to see a return, not to a normal, certainly, but to something that will be a new normal? And there's a series of months coming up there. You can, from May all the way down to sometime in 2021 if you're a little more pessimistic. Once again, we've got dozens and dozens of poll results coming in. I'll give them a couple more seconds. All right, let's wrap that up, and we'll share some of the results. So Mayor Watson, you can see that the people online right now think that it will in fact be July when a lot of people are starting to reoccupy their offices. No one can say for sure, but that's certainly what today's attendees are suggesting. Peter, do you want to go to the next question? We're getting down to the bottom of the hour a little bit, but we probably have time for at least 2 more questions.
The next question was submitted by one of our attendees, and it has to deal with transit ridership. Of course, as so many people are working from home, we've seen transit ridership levels dramatically drop. There's a lot of predictions that we may be seeing a bit of a permanent shift, or at least throughout 2020, of having more people working from home. The question is, do you foresee any need to adjust transit service levels and possibly reduce service levels to meet this anticipated reduction in commuter demand?
Well, we actually did that a couple of weeks ago by announcing that we're going to be on a Saturday schedule, which is a reduced schedule because clearly the volume is not there. I took the train and the bus, I think, a week ago, and there were only 3 or 4 people on my train car with me. And that was, I think, at 8:30 in the morning. So you're quite right, the numbers have fallen dramatically. As you know, we had some real challenges with the first phase of LRT, and they've been working on that. And in fact, this weekend, the system was shut down and replaced by buses as they do some more testing so that we are in a much better shape and more reliable service when we come back full steam. The reality is that we still need a vibrant transit system. Maybe a few more people, whether that's a few hundred or a few thousand more that might be able to work from home. There's still hundreds of thousands of people that rely on transit. You think of the people that are staffing the cash registers at Loblaws or Shoppers Drug Mart or Rexall. They have to get to work. Many of them are on minimum wage. They don't have a car, or they don't have access to a parking spot, or it's too expensive. So we have to provide that service. And we're continuing work on phase 2. You can see the construction out by the airport, the Byron Linear Park in the West End, and the 174 in the East End, because we have to get the system farther east to Trim, farther west to Moody Drive and Algonquin College, and farther south to the airport, as well as Riverside South. So transit continues to be a priority. I'm meeting on the reliability and the fixes that we need to do in order to regain the public's confidence in that system. But it has been working quite well with reduced numbers, obviously, but we want to make sure it's working really well when things are back up and running in the overall economy.
Peter, we've got about 2 more minutes. Why don't you go to our final question, and then we'll respect the mayor's commitment here and get him focused on some other matters at City Hall. So go ahead, Peter.
Great. So for the final question, it actually stems from the police checkpoints that were set up on some of the interprovincial bridges. Of course, Ottawa and Gatineau are very, very interconnected. It's a regional economy. The question is, as we do move towards reopening the economies on both sides of the Ottawa River, what measures are being taken to ensure that both Ottawa and Gatineau are working together, given how closely the 2 cities are connected as an economic region?
That's a good question, Peter, because we've always had a very strong relationship. Maxime Pedneau-Jobin and I, working on 2017, the Amazon bid, questioning federal candidates, infrastructure, LRT. They're developing their own LRT system. It's one area we disagree. I didn't think the decision to have checkpoints on the Gatineau side made a whole lot of sense, to be perfectly honest. But that's their call. We certainly have indicated that we're not going to replicate that by putting police checkpoints. It would be a waste of our officers' time, according to our chief of police, and put them at greater risk of contracting COVID-19, sticking their heads in, asking where people are going and so on. So, the Quebec government opened up all of the borders except the Outaouais yesterday. I'm not sure why we were chosen not to open up the borders, but I think the sooner that opens, the better, because as you know, a lot of people live in Ottawa, work in Gatineau, and vice versa. And we want to make sure that interconnectivity of both people and commerce and tourism and travel is thriving when we're back to the new normal.
Well, that's all the time we have, Mr. Mayor. And in fact, you were very generous at giving us 30 minutes of your time. We're perfectly at the bottom of the hour there. So thank you very much for joining us, and wish you good health and strong leadership as we continue through this. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
And Peter, thank you for everything you've done today in sifting through all those questions. Thanks everyone for attending. We had a really great turnout today, Appreciate the mayor taking some time. And just as we wrap up, I'm going to once again just give a quick shout out to Bright Sky. Bright Sky is a Ottawa-based company that specializes in cybersecurity, and you can look out for them in the next 10 days or so. We'll have a dedicated session to cybersecurity. I personally have noticed a lot of odd things happening in my email. We run on a G Suite type platform. I had to phone Google a couple times, block some addresses. But thanks for you, Peter, for being with us. And of course, to everyone online, this is the end of this edition of Coping with COVID-19. But you can also go to our YouTube channel. There are many episodes there. You can go to SoundCloud. And of course, Peter and David Kavesi and the rest of the editorial team are working hard on an hourly basis to update obj.ca. That's all the time we have for today. We're gonna wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us, but please stay tuned for more coverage of coping with COVID and other editorial reports from OBJ. See you soon.